Hello, everyone's got a seat? Getting there? Welcome to the 2021 PRIF Consortium Annual Assembly. I wish to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains and the land in which the University of Adelaide's North Terrace, Waite and Roseworthy campuses are built. I will be your MC for the day. My name is Ruth Shaw. I am the manager of the ARC Training Centre for Integrated Operations for Complex Resources, a major project that is closely related to the PRIF Consortium. I previously managed the ARC Copper Uranium Transformational Research Hub that received a commendation in the 2020 Premier's Awards in Energy and Mining. Oh, mouthful. I've worked at universities and in industry in both research and managing major scientific research projects. My undergrad is in experimental physics, my PhD is in plant physiology, and my postgrad was in radionuclide sensors in mineral processing. When I'm not at work, I enjoy playing touch football, bike riding, reading, and a good binge-worthy TV series. I'd also like to introduce Tatiana Kamelova. Wave, Tatiana, I think she's down at the back. Tatiana is the reason we're all gathered here today. She's the organiser and coordinator of today's event. Tatiana is the PRIF Consortium manager. She has a PhD in applied engineering, a master's degree in chemical engineering, and over 10 years of research experience in minerals processing and materials science. Tatiana enjoys theatre, art, and travelling. If you have any general questions about today or the PRIF Consortium, please feel free to speak to Tatiana. Now on to the business of today, with regards to housekeeping. In case of an emergency, the Wine Centre staff will guide us to in the correct direction, so look out for the high-vis vests. The toilets are out the door and down the left at the end of the corridor. Morning tea, lunch and afternoon tea will be served towards the back of the room. Please wear your masks when exiting the room and going to the bathroom, but when you're in the room, it's okay to take them off. And please check in with the QR codes when entering this room, not just for the Wine Centre, but also when you enter this room specifically. During today's program, after each presentation, we'll have 5 minutes of questions from the room. Yusha will be our roving mic for today. Where's Yusha? There she is. So please wait until Yusha gets to you with the microphone before you ask a question, so that the people online can hear your questions. After each consortium program, programs A and B, there is time designated for discussion and questions, and during that time we'll go to any online questions we have. Hirad, Yerniaz, Linda and Kirsten are compiling those questions, so if you're online, please submit your questions to the Zoom chat. And if people become unruly today, I've downloaded a Bell app, so if you hear this, please take your seats and pay attention. So first today, we'd like to welcome Professor Nigel Cook. He is the director of the PRIF Consortium. His background is mineralogy, geochemistry, and the characterisation and origin of mineral deposits, including extensive work over the past decade at Olympic Dam, characterising several new mineral species at the micron scale. When Nigel's not at work, he enjoys listening to 70s and 80s music, watching tennis and pottering in his garden with his 2 cats and his dog. He's dreaming of his next big US road trip in a post-COVID world. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you, Ruth, for that introduction, and welcome everybody to today's annual assembly. It's a great honour to have you all here in the room and to actually have a face-to-face meeting. We are really, really blessed. It's a great privilege to have our Chief Scientist of South Australia, Caroline McMillen, here with us today, and other representatives of the state government who are the biggest sponsor of this project. So welcome everybody, and welcome to everybody who's listening online as well. I'm just going to use a couple of minutes very briefly to talk a little bit about what this consortium is, who we are, and what we are here to do. The Integrated Mining Consortium was established 4 years ago, and our aim really is to work with the mining industry in South Australia, principally the copper mining industry in South Australia, to develop tools that can integrate the entire mining value chain by using machine learning, sensors, and data analytics, and creating technology solutions to help boost South Australia's copper production. We have two programs, the program Upstream, the program Downstream, with our two partners, OZ Minerals and BHP Olympic Dam. So really, it's a transdisciplinary project involving people with many different backgrounds working together for a common goal. And you'll hear today presentations from our HDR students and also our postdocs working within the consortium. So it's a 5-year initiative with a total funding of around about $14 million. And our end date is now the 28th of February 2023. So we're just coming now into our final year of the project. There's still a lot to be done, but I'm also very proud of all that has been achieved so far, and you'll be hearing about that today. We don't only have the two university partners and we have two end-user partners, we also have 17 other industry partners, mostly METS companies that are very much involved in what we're doing. There are 14 research projects and 11 translation projects involved. And these are aligned and focused to specific areas of interest of our end users, OZ Minerals in Program A, which we'll hear about first, and then the Program B with BHP a little bit later today. So we are a group of 15 experienced researchers. These are the academics in mining, mineral processing, and computer science working together on a common theme. With our 10 research students, 8 postdoctoral researchers, 4 master's students, 2 bachelors, and 9 honours students. And you'll also hear a presentation today from one of our current honours groups. We aim to address end-user partner challenges to maximise value from complex resources and minimise environmental impacts. We aim to demonstrate the value of and provide innovative tools for integration between the resource, mining, ore delivery, processing, and leaching stages, and to commercialise technological outcomes for global market opportunities in collaboration with our translation partners. This is the structure. I won't dwell on this too much, but you can see that there are in blue there the various research projects divided into our Program A and Program B, and then in yellow also the translation projects, some of which you will also hear about in today's presentation. Highlights for 2021, well, the first of our students have now completed their research theses and have gone off to do greater and wonderful things, mostly out in industry. We have trained confident researchers ready to join the workforce. We're proud of that. We have a list at the moment of more than 100 publications, conference abstracts, conference papers, and full-length papers, and we have been presenting at major conferences online. I think we have real significant progress in reaching real data milestones in the project in partnership with the translation partners, which is something that we are really, I think, very pleased about. And we've really been a kind of a platform, if you like, for development of new multi-university, multi-partner initiatives that really consolidate Adelaide's position, and that's the two universities, University of Adelaide, University of South Australia, as really as the hub for collaborative research with the minerals industry. There's more information available on our website. So I'm going to stop now. That's given you a very brief introduction to who we are and what we're about, and I think it's important now to hear some of the researchers themselves tell you about their results.
We'll first hear from our first guest speaker for today. We will welcome Professor Caroline McMillen, the Chief Scientist for South Australia. Professor McMillen is a distinguished medical and health researcher who holds national and international roles in research, industry engagement, innovation, strategy, and policy development. Her insights and experience were instrumental in the development of the Excite strategy, South Australia's 10-year plan to grow the economy through R&D and the advancement of future industries, and maintain our proud reputation as a centre for scientific excellence. Professor McMillen has previously worked at the University of Adelaide as Head of the Department of Physiology and the University of South Australia as the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Vice President of Research and Innovation. Welcome, Professor McMillen.
Look, thank you, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to be here this morning. And I'd like to thank you for two things in particular. The first is, as Chief Scientist for South Australia, everyone goes, great title, great. What do you do? And I now know, because I am going to use, actually my office unlocks complex resources through lean processing. I think that's exactly what we do. So thank you for that if you see your tagline on my office door. But secondly, what we do and have been working through is to really build a plan which will ensure we have a very high-performing research and innovation value chain, which through translation of the innovation really drives the supply chain and drives economic growth for the state, which of course will bring productivity, a measure of a healthy economy and good standards of living, and also employment, and employment in key industry sectors for the future. We also need to have that framed within a community which is creative, has got good healthcare and a sustainable environment. So creating an R&D plan around that key value chain to supply chain relationship. My second thanks is you've given me a poster child, because the very elements of this consortium started in 2017, well before an Excite plan was conceived, is the exact mix of beginning with the end users and the translation partners, beginning to shape the agenda, harnessing research excellence, well-established excellence, to really, in the collaborations with those partners, begin to come through with that innovation. And importantly, with foresight, and that foresight in bringing the frontier technologies really into the spotlight, not only in the used forms currently, but to look at what's coming. So that, for me, is a worked example of the underpinnings of the Excite strategy. But let me just translate that for the strategy. What's come through for me in the consortium is the innovation, but that integration across disciplines, between technology and discipline and field experts, and the pull force of an industry and an energy resources combination, resources industry seeking that sustainability and harnessing world-class know-how and the strength of the industry know-how together to generate the future outcomes. So for those of you in the room, and I was conscious that we do have some early mid-career researchers, I thought it might be worth firstly indicating why the state has focused strongly in this last few years on R&D. And really, it's a story that has been formed across the world in the last 2 decades, the way in which R&D is important for economic growth and healthy economies across nations and regions. To some extent, Australia's been a bit late to the table in that because it's had such great economic underpinning by our commodities, by terms of trade, by our markets, that reasonably the message of innovation wasn't so writ large for Australia until we have begun to see, as we've seen recently, the challenges in markets, some of the sovereign capability issues, seeing our traditional products no longer finding across the board the markets that they previously had. And I spent the last, before I came here, the last 7 years as a Vice-Chancellor at the University of Newcastle. And Newcastle and Geelong and Wollongong were all the canaries in the mine for Australia. The transition hit hard there as traditional industry sectors struggled to provide intergenerational job security and struggled to see a way through and required the R&D that the universities in those regions could provide. But why does R&D, why does it matter apart from our fundamental human desire to drive new knowledge? Well, if we look at this interesting graph, and it's a big graph in the sense of what it's bringing together, a 10-year average of multi-factor productivity, so just take that as healthy economy, in different countries, plotted against their 10-year average R&D expenditure as a percentage of their overall economic heft, a percentage of their gross domestic product. And what you see is a surprising relationship. This has come out through a whole array of international global think tanks and World Bank, World Development, OECD, EU type measures, whether it's within a European context, across the world context, or different timeframes. And what you see here is a relationship suggesting clearly that R&D has a strong relationship to your healthy economic productivity. The USA above the line, that's a sort of amplification effect because of a synergy of multinationals, the way in which the trade, regulatory trade system, and that really combination of intensity and economic dynamism. Ireland, it's all about policy, all about policy. They've done fabulous work on their research and innovation policy. Italy, for Italians, it doesn't look so good there, but I happened to have the privilege to go to the European Space Conference, the forum held in Italy, and the dynamism there now picking up, actually, high-tech industries is going to move that dot. Australia, just a bit under the line, not disastrous. That was 2014-15. And that R&D as a proportion of GDP was around about 1.9%. Then it fell in the next year. Then it fell in the following year. And this year it's down again. And that's important because that's not a good sign in terms of the impact on the multi-factor productivity. But as I've said, there has been a response moving in this direction in Australia. And particularly in supporting business expenditure in R&D, because much of that R&D expenditure is underpinned by business expenditure in R&D, and the reason it's falling, the overall R&D expenditure as a proportion of R&D, is because business expenditure is falling. So that's a focus. Just two other reasons. How does it work? If you spend money in R&D, why does your economy and your productivity grow? There's been a lot of work done, empirical work, innovation, what's new, product, service, system coming out of that R&D. It's estimated to account for around about the half of that GDP growth that you get. It's a very important driver of long-term productivity. And underwrites competitiveness and growth. And innovation-active firms consistently outperform firms that don't innovate at a firm level, including their own productivity and profitability. And the other piece is the emergence of frontier technologies, platform technologies, emerging technologies, all names for that high-tech group of industries that have a role across industry sectors. We're seeing no longer a relationship between one science field, one technology, one industry sector. There's a much more dynamic relationship. And a firm level, business level data shows that if you take up technology at the forefront, your business grows and it grows robustly. If you don't, you stagnate and your gap between your competitor widens. And a challenge for Australia is that most of our businesses wait until the bigger industries in the country have taken up a new technology, adapted it, made it bespoke, and then they might take it up, by which time competitors may have come in to eat their lunch. And that's a big vulnerability for Australia. So those are key elements underpinning the relationship between R&D, a research and innovation value chain. This is just a nice picture, actually. It shows all of the R&D ever done on anything that was going to go to become artificial intelligence. in the world between 1998 and 2018. And it separated the proportion of the work published, the research publications published into fields. 1998, it's all beige, which was all computational linguistics. Not awfully exciting, some of us might think. Some of us might really enjoy it. But most people would have said, I'm glad they're doing it, but why are they doing it? What's ever going to come from computational linguistics? 2008, we had the smartphone. Then, between 2008 and 2018, an uplift in image and video processing in particular. And what do we have? Facial recognition on every device and being used across for security reasons. What we also see, that big dark brown proportion, which is actually artificial intelligence, is getting narrower in more recent years. That's because it's now all subspecialties, and they are now their own field and driving fields within that overarching field we call artificial intelligence. Big impact, it's at the background, of course, of e-commerce. As we know, it's taken over our lives. AI, we all know that our Kindle will tell us what it is we're going to want to read, and they're right, and so forth. The algorithms work for us. But more importantly, it's a huge base, the e-commerce, a huge basis for logistics. So Alibaba, Singles Day, smashed its own records with over $30 billion in sales. The first $1 billion of transactions were completed and delivered within 24 hours across places like Washington, because the algorithms had said what the orders were likely to be, where they were likely to come from, where the warehouses needed to be placed, where the robots needed to be in the warehouse to get the deliveries out in 24 hours. This is a logistics industry. Google in Kazakhstan is helping Kazakhstan with their mining industry. This is a logistics industry. Is earth science, is geosciences going to become subverted to the logistics equation? A very interesting future dynamic. However, those pieces simply put context, no more than context, for the EXCITE plan. And the EXCITE plan is a little contrived. EX is excellence, C for collaboration, INT for innovation and translation. Yeah, the final E is really a fudge, because without it, we would have been exiting the state of science. We needed an E. And so enabled future workforce is as good as we got, because we need a future workforce, and the E helped. Now, that isn't contrived in terms of the value chain. Those are the elements required to build, as this consortium has built, the opportunity to pull innovation through, translate it, and grow the economy, grow skilled jobs, or deliver a better health system and service, and particularly underpin with new technologies environmental sustainability. We're seeing, I just put underneath the sorts of projects that have been part of recent investments by the federal government, who, in seeing the sovereign capability challenge, have begun, particularly in manufacturing, in key industry sectors, of course this is one of them, and across whole areas of investment now, picking up on that innovation value chain drives the supply chain. Excellence, I'll just show you for South Australia, where South Australia sits. You see Australia on the left and South Australia on the right. These are data from the independent provider Clarivate on research publications coded within the fields that you see. I have asked for the ranking to be done against the OECD, not the world. The world's a very noisy place, actually, for research, high and low performers. OECD, very research intensive. What you can see, earth sciences for quality, the citation impact, is in the top half of the OECD in its performance as quartile 2. And industry collaboration, this is in Australia, to your left, is also in the top half. But if you look in South Australia, again, top half for quality, we're in the top quartile for industry research collaboration. That's a strong enabler. That allows the realization of growth sector plans for this industry. And so I could talk through, but the enablers of those technologies that come out of ICT, empowered through engineering, very important in the industry sector, the technology itself, maths, physics. These are all in the top quartile, and some in the top 3, and some outperforming the top performer in the OECD. If you just look down at South Australia, we are high performers. Most people, when I show the graph, they say, you must be dreaming, or they say, are you sure? I'm a scientist, I'm sure. So reasonably, this is excellence and collaboration through earth sciences, which we are reaping the benefits of in a research and innovation value chain. But how do you enable in this state, and this is just one small example, how do you enable in this state harnessing those frontier technology applications, bringing the early research workforce to meet with industries who may not necessarily naturally meet, and be able to bring their excellence and innovation through to meet with industry? How do you build a culture where those platform technologies are understood and shared not only by SMEs, but also across industry sectors under challenge to regrow some areas of strength in their supply chain? One of the strategies, I'm not going to go through all the strategies, one of the strategies is to really leverage the work that's gone into the capital invested in our innovation districts. The west end of North Terrace, Adelaide Biomed City, Tonsley, Lot 14, and ones around the north and ones beyond into defence. If you have leading-edge anchor institutions, leadership culture and collaborations, amenities and infrastructures, competitive advantage and market drivers, these perform incredibly well and, importantly, to drive innovation economies in regions and cities. I'm not making that up. That's from a whole raft of evidence from the Brookings Institution and has been repeatedly shown to work across countries, regions and jurisdictions like our own. We're at that early stage of really deriving the benefit through this, and in particular harnessing those districts and neighbourhoods to bring in external intermediaries to introduce industry to research, researchers to researchers, different fields of research, to make the connections in a highly curated manner that's been used, say, by the catapult system in the UK to really pull out the innovation, remove that reluctance of small firms to harness the frontier technology early. Build frontier technology capability centres people can see, touch and feel it, and be able to get introduced at low cost before they have to invest at high cost, and build new forms of industry doctoral training centres primarily based on the Engineering, Physics and Science Research Council in the UK, who for the last decade have delivered a really impressive model that takes all of our Australian models and puts them a bit, I would say, in the shade. Happy to have that contested. But nevertheless, these are great places to bring and converge those scientists in this room who've got different AI strengths, machine learning strengths, engineering strengths, and so forth, together for purposeful work which will drive systematic industry sector innovation. Lot 14, of course, has that in spades for bumping up against those new technologies, and it is critical to open up Lot 14 into that dynamic manner of having the opportunity to have the external intermediaries translate those technologies and their uses for industry and for research players. Critically, these are enablers. Enablers have to have something to enable. The enabling here is our priority industry sectors, which each are different in the way in which they harness the research and innovation value chain, in which they access the enablers, and to the extent of the industries within those industry sectors, the difference between the frontier player and the small player that's rather reluctant to move forwards and therefore may or may not create its own future. Minerals and resources, energy, critically part of that, driven energy and mining, a mature sector, a sector that gets this, that offers the poster child opportunities through consortia like this to showcase. There are a raft of clear strategies with clear timelines and clear landing runways and takeoff points and sets of clear performance indicators based on a raft of performance indicators collected by jurisdictions who've been doing this for 20 years and have worked out what not to collect and what to measure. Now you'll see excellence, collaboration. We've touched on a light touch into innovation and translation, enabling the future workforce. I want to finish by drawing attention to the World Economic Forum of Jobs of the Future. South Australia is going to face a challenge, as all jurisdictions in Australia is having the workforce. Workforce wants technology adoption. This is the mining and metals prediction of what they'll need by 2025, industry sectors across the world. What you see there is mainly automation, robotics, IoT, big data projects, cloud computing. AI is in there, but not quite as high as in other sectors. Here you see barriers to adoption of new technologies, skill gaps writ large in the local labour market, not getting the talent that's specialised, insufficient understanding of opportunities. Those are the big gaps, and skill gaps among leadership. This is 2020, looking at 2025. And emerging jobs that they see is the roles that are going to be in high demand. Interesting, AI machine learning, data analysts, robotics, digital transformation specialists, remote sensing you would expect. Very interesting to see the consortium is in the zone for those of you seeking employment in that worldview. And the impact on the workforce, if the industry can't get those people to fill those roles, they'll have to do a number of things, one of which is modify the location within which the organisation operates. And that's a strong and important signal for the regions. So I won't go through the energy, utilities and technologies piece, and that's equally interesting. The conclusion's the same. Companies will move if they can't get the new skills they need. Australia as large, this is not minerals and mining. What you're seeing is Australia is leaning in. 97% of the businesses across all industry sectors now said they need AI. Those of you who have had that in your project, you're beginning to become very sellable. Sorry about that. Emerging job roles and high demand. You're fine. You want to stay in this industry. Of course you do. You have a small tag on your ankle, actually. You will not be able to leave the airport because the mining industry wants you. So we just use the new technology. So finally, this consortium is genuinely, and I'm being very genuine, this ahead of its time. It's showing the components working. It's driving the large industry sectors that both our end user and translation partners. To see the outcome of this, to plot that economic outcome, will go very much forwards to being able to show how the full systems work. People don't get concepts, they get prototypes. This is a strong prototype in a South Australian situation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to learn a lot about the consortium, but more importantly, for taking that leadership that's required at all levels, whether you're a researcher or indeed a professorial, for the university collaboration, the university's research collaboration, for the international positioning, for the industry engagement that is absolutely a very synergistic and clearly productive relationship. Watch Excite. We are integrating the Excite plan with the industry sector plans, just a tiny job. So I'll see you in about 25 years. If anyone's got an AI for a whole of state R&D plan, look, if they could just send it to me, because it might save me a little bit of time. Thanks so very much. Thank you.
very inspiring talk. It's a great way to start.
And my humble apologies, I have to go and start it other than treadmill.
I know. Okay, good luck.
We now go on to Program A of the consortium and introduce Professor Peter Dowd, the Program A leader. Peter is also the director of the ARC Training Centre for Integrated Operations for Complex Resources. Peter has more than 40 years' experience in academic research, teaching and administration, and in consulting to industry. His research interests include many areas, from predictions in mineral resourcing to financial analysis and modelling. And he's been cited as one of Australia's 100 most influential engineers by the Institution of Engineers Australia. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. I'm going to briefly introduce the projects in Program A and then show you how we've proceeded with those that are finished, those that are about to finish, and those that yet will finish sometime later in the time of the consortium. You've seen this many times. This is the overview of the research projects. You can see the blue boxes represent research projects, RP, and the TP are the translation projects. In general, the research projects are PhD projects or similar, and the translation projects are undertaken by postdoctoral researchers. Largely, that is to translate research that has taken place within the training, within the PRIF, getting mixed up with the other one, within PRIF, and making them useful or embedded within industry. There's a long list here of the 7 of them. I won't go through reading them all in detail, but you can see they cover optimization, resource heterogeneity as opposed to homogeneity, constraints on uncertainty on most things that we measure and estimate, including domain and particle sizes and so on, correlations of elemental, mineralogical and hyperspectral sensor data, resource heterogeneity again from trucking to multiple stockpiles and retrieving from the stockpiles, strategies for blending optimization and mill feed sourcing. The translation projects, you can see here are 6, the first one subdivided into 2, ore tracking from the resource in the ground to the crusher, validating geological logs, muck pile fragmentation measurement. This is measuring at the site where the fragmentation takes place from blasting and defining those characteristics. Sensors for mineral identification, stockpile modelling, mine optimization under uncertainty, and mill feed sorting. So here are the projects outlined now in a graphical form. Across the top you have the translation projects, and underneath you have the research projects. If we look at the states of these, you can see from the left to the right that part 1 of project 1 has been completed, and part 2 is about 2/3 completed. Translation project 2 is completed, as is project 3, project 4 2/3 completed, 5 2/3 completed, and the 6th one has been completed. Of the research projects, these are the PhD projects. Where there is nothing written underneath it, these are research projects that are underway. I can confirm that they've all met their targets and are on target to be completed within the time frame that was agreed. RP14 on the bottom, the first one there is on hold, awaiting a suitable candidate for that position. We haven't been successful in appointing anyone to that position. Part 2 has been completed. Project 6 thesis submitted, and Project 7 thesis submitted. So that's an overall statement of where we are, and I think given the restrictions of the past 2 years, it's a fairly good report card, and you will hear from each one of these projects over after this presentation of Program A. So I shall stop talking and turn over to those who are really doing the work.
I can help you eat those, Peter. So, to the first of our PhD projects for today. Yusha Li is from the School of Civil and Environmental and Mining Engineering at the University of Adelaide. Yusha will be telling us about resource heterogeneity modelling for optimal ore extraction. Outside of work, Yusha enjoys playing the piano and doing yoga and loves spending time with her cats. Yusha.
Thank you, Ruth. So, this one. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yusha Li, and I'm a PhD student in mining from University of Adelaide. And I'm working on a project to resource heterogeneity modeling for optimal ore extraction. So within the consortium, my project is here. And the overall objective of this project is to investigate the small-scale heterogeneity so that the mining selectivity can be improved eventually. In today's presentation, I will firstly go through the background and motivation, and then I will explain our key findings and also introduce what we've done to achieve those key findings, and also include some potential future work at the end. So the background, the concept of heterogeneity is well known in mining. Usually we use this term to describe the phenomenon that in a deposit, the metal or mineral is not uniformly distributed in space. So for example, this is a block model here, and if we are going to mine these two blocks, it's very likely that the red one is an ore block and the blue one is a waste block. However, if we could get some additional information when drilling blast holes and then downscale these two blocks to mining unit scale with this additional information from blast holes, we might find that actually there are some waste mining units within the ore block and some ore mining units within this waste block. So the investigation of small-scale grid heterogeneity actually can bring great benefits for improving mining selectivity and reducing dilution, which is the motivation of this research. So currently we have 3 key findings corresponding to the 3 objectives that we set in the beginning of this project. The first one is to integrate the information from blast holes to the block model so that the small-scale grid heterogeneity can be reflected in near real time, which is called rapid resource model updating. And this is aiming for the improvement of mining selectivity and recoverability. And the second one is we extended the rapid resource model updating to application on cases with multiple variables and non-Gaussian variables. And the last one is we are going to develop a framework which is called the Mining Selectivity Evaluation Framework, so that we can investigate the relationship between mining selectivity and scale. And we probably can determine the optimal extraction scale using this framework prior to any mining operation. So I'll start with the first objective. In the first objective, a Kalman filter-based approach is proposed for rapid resource model updating. Kalman filter is an iterative process to quickly estimate the variable value whenever there is any new data incorporated, like a graph on the left. So the 3 equations on the right-hand side, they are especially derived for resource model updating in this project. And the main benefit of using this approach is the updated model can be generated in near real time. And we used a case study to verify this method. Firstly, we simulated the ground truth, which will be used as a reference to evaluate the updating results. And then we extracted the drill core samples, and based on this drill core samples, we created the block model. So this is the prior model to be updated later. As mining operation progresses, we will drill some blast holes, and it's possible for us to get some information from these blast holes. So we can use this information to downscale and update the prior model so that the small scale great heterogeneity can be reflected in the updated model. And in this case study, we evaluated the updating results firstly by using the mean squared error between the updating results and the ground truth. So we can see as updating progresses, the mean squared error decreases gradually, although there are fluctuations. And also we compared the grade tonnage curves between the updated model, the prior model, and the ground truth. We found both mean grade and the amount of ore become more accurate after updating. So it can be concluded from this case study that the proposed method can be used to downscale and update the resource model in a more flexible way. And also the updated model can be generated in near real time with acceptable level of accuracy. And also by using this method, the complexity of creating fine scale data and co-creating different types of data can be successfully avoided. So the next step is to solve two issues of rapid resource model updating. And the first issue is multivariate updating. So this one is solved by adding more variables to the column vector of the state variable, which is on in those three equations I mentioned earlier. And also the cross correlation between all variables needs to be added to the error covariance matrix of the state variable, also in those equations. And the next issue is non-Gaussian variables, because Kalman filter requires all the variables to be Gaussian distributed. So these non-Gaussian variables, they are solved by applying Gaussian transform on them before updating and then applying back transform on the updating results. Also, a correction factor needs to be added to reduce the impact of the change of support because we are downscaling the resource model. For example, this is how we apply Gaussian transform on the two variables in this case study. We have copper and gold grade. So we can see before transform, both distributions are right scaled, especially gold. But after transform, they become normally distributed and are ready for updating. We can also see from the graph that both variables, they are highly correlated. So the case study here is similar to the previous one, but this time we will use the amount of mining units that are misclassified to evaluate the results. So there are two types of misclassification. One is all mining units that are misclassified as waste, and the other one is vice versa, of course. So we can see from the graph that the amount of misclassification actually is reduced by around 50% after updating, which means the updating method also works well in this case study, and the two issues, multivariate updating and non-Gaussian variables updating, they are successfully solved here. So the next step is to develop a mining selectivity evaluation framework. Again, we simulate the realization and extract all the drill core samples. And based on the drill core samples, we create the prior model, and then we use the rapid resource model updating method to update and downscale this prior model. But this time, we will downscale it to different scales, for example, 3x3, 4x4, or 5x5 mining units. And according to these updated models, we will get some sort of outlines of the ore area, and then we transfer these outlines to the realization that we simulated earlier so that we can get the true results of mining. Remember, we downscaled the prior model to different scales, so we have multiple updating results so that we will get the true mining results from different scales. So for this realization, we will get a kind of relationship between the true mining results and scale. And then we will repeat all these steps so that we will get results from a lot of realizations. And eventually, if we summarize these results, we will get a trend of this relationship between metal recovery and scale. Currently, this framework is being verified using a case study, and it's expected that the metal recovery will increase when the scale becomes smaller. And hopefully, this framework will be beneficial for the balance between reducing mining costs and improving mining selectivity. So in terms of future work, like I said, I will need to complete the case study of the last objective, the framework. And also, it'll be better if the rapid resource model updating and the mining selectivity evaluation framework can be further verified using a real case study. And also, another related potential topic is the quantification of grade heterogeneity, which will help to compare the mining selectivity more easily. So that brings to the end of my presentation. I would like to acknowledge my supervisors, the consortium and our collaboration partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusha. Can we turn the microphone on?
It's on always.
You stay there, I'll be your roving mic.
Oh, sure, thanks.
Has anybody got any questions from the audience?
Yep. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Just the your very last slide there, when you were talking about the scale-based approach.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got an idea of a sweet spot or an optimal in mind? I mean, obviously, as you increase the scale,
Yeah.
you're fighting other factors. So, what are you looking for to come up with a sweet spot?
Actually, we have two results. We have the results from two realizations. The relationship between metal recovery and scale. Yes, it indeed, the metal recovery increases when the scale becomes smaller, but there's a point that the metal recovery tends to be stable. No matter how smaller the scale is. So that point could possibly be the optimal scale for this deposit.
Yeah, so when you see things plateauing, that's a good sweet spot when you
Yes,
see that
exactly.
level out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that makes
Thank
sense.
you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any more questions? We've time for one more question. Oh, coming.
That was a good presentation. By looking at your data, I assume you're using an open pit scenario?
It's actually a synthetic case study.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's okay. So open pit scenario is relatively or more straightforward. Have you considered,
Yes.
have you thought about in the background what if you were doing that kind of work for a stoping situation, where you're a lot more selective already?
We haven't, because we've been using this the same case for all these three key findings. But yes, we would definitely do some more like stoping case study underground, because it's more complex. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Yusha. Next, we welcome Yoniaz Abaldeen, a PhD student from the School of Civil, Environmental and Mining Engineering at the University of Adelaide. His project is Constraints and Quantifying Uncertainty on Resource Domain Boundaries. I've been told Yoniaz dreams of being a computer game designer, but of course he's also interested in mining engineering and geological modelling. Sounds like an afterthought. Green button forward, red button back.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm working on research project number 3. So, it's about constraining and quantifying resource domain boundaries generally. So, if we go back to the general graph of the consortium, my project is under a geostatistical modeling and value chain optimization group here. So the value proposition from my side in this research is delivery of more accurate model, and that will reduce the overall uncertainty in mill feed and also enable some product optimization. So today's outline is like that. We briefly talk about the domains and how to define that, and its impact on the mine value chain. Then I will describe my proposed method for the domaining technique, and work to date. So let me give some brief background information. In general, in mining resource estimation, there are 4 major steps. First one is data preparation, and the second one is the defining the domain of interest, which is directly related to my research. And the third one is the resource estimation itself. Then fourth one is the defining the uncertainty to be sure that there is no any risks associated. So my key findings in this research is about, first is quantifying uncertainty in general helps to define the uncertainty itself and also to reduce that. And the second one, we are developing the framework that will reduce the uncertainty in mill feed by considering probabilistic domain boundaries. So the significance and innovation of this research is, first of all, the proposed method is overall is novel framework, and it has a stochastic component there. And the other advantages is the practicality of the proposed approach. Also, another novelty is the integration of geometallurgical variables into the process. And overall, it will optimize the mineral process and also give some good information for risk analysis of problematic zones in the deposit. And overall, it will help to the mine planning. So proposed method of domaining looks like that, briefly. So we have our geological information. And in the first part, in simulation part of the proposed methodology, we do the simulation of the grades, which is geochemical concentration of geochemical elements. Then what we do next is in part 2, we train our classifier. Based on that classifier, we use our predictor to predict the outcome from the part 1, which is simulation. Then we produce our probabilistic domains. So the work to date is like that. If we talk about the part 1, which is, everything like procedure was done smoothly. So the pre-processing was conducted, data is clean, and the subset of Malu deposit from Prominent Hill, from Malu ore body was selected here. So the light blue area is the area that I have selected for my case. And all necessary procedures like variography analysis and cross-validation was conducted correctly. And if you have some questions, we can talk about that after the presentation. And other information like the simulation parameters also is in this slide. And overall, there are 100 scenarios. We call it 100 realizations. And I have the results from that, which are used for further classification, part 2. So overall, I have 26 elements to train my classifier. Several methods was used, and the best one was the gradient boosting method. In my case, it was extreme gradient boosting method, which is the most fast one. And for the 12 classes, there's an output. So just to give some visual understanding of the work and the work itself. So we have here 2 different models. In left side is the reference model from the Prominent Hill done by geologists. And in right side is the most probable case that is a result of my work. So I will dive in the details in next slides. So in the left side is the reference model, and on right side, this patchy one is the realization one, basically first scenario. So when we consider overall 100 realizations, results is much better and smoother. and which brings to next slide. And there is some region that is questionable. So the question is, as Shakespeare says, is to connect or not to connect the zones. So based on our probability map of most probable case, we should judge, should we connect this continuous domain in general, because in the geological interpretation it's continuous, but based on the data that we have, it shows it's not. So that is the question that I'm working now as a post-processing of my proposed methodology. And another thing that we should also count on is the data availability. In this map, you can see that red color in general means that within 25 meters of centroid of the block, you can at least catch one sample. So the light green means that within 50, and within 100 is the light blue color. So we should also consider this data availability in the region to judge the previous probability map of the boundaries. So in general, the future work of my research, the next future work of my research is to process the results to be sure that those things like some of the domains discontinuous is correct or not. And also work with the pre-processing, which includes analyzing some input data, because some of the logs are done long time ago, and some of them is misinterpreted by the other geologists' opinion. So we should consider several things like that. And also, I would like to test my method with other methods in the field to be sure that it's the good one and the great one. And after that, I would like to finalize the results and produce some research output. So I would like to then acknowledge my supervisors, Oz Minerals, and the Research Consortium and state government for supporting this project. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Any questions? Yusha's out there in the room.
Yeah. Anyone have questions?
Kathy?
Yeah.
These are all good. So far, so good on the presentation. So
Thank
everybody
you.
else has got a high bar to keep up with. Question on the, were you, with those 12 classes, those 12 classes were provided by the client, you know?
Yes,
so
yes.
Oz. And so you're forcing your realizations to fit those classes. Has your work actually shown that there might be different classes?
Actually, when I train, those 12 classes already defined. So it means that if it's within that range of the predictors parameters, it will catch just those classes. And if it's, so there is some like a greater or equal to, which is on that, if the class is in that side, it will be on that class. So if you have more classes, yeah, it will also predict that one as well.
Yeah, because that's always interesting. You can never, just because the geologist says there's a class doesn't mean it's true, and that applies to geologists everywhere. So part of the value of your type of work is to say, hey, your classification might be okay, but then there's better classification possibly.
Yeah, sure. I have done some preliminary case study with 5 classes, and the accuracy there was quite high, because that 5 classes was originally from the reference model. But because geologist wants to see some more classes, he gave me like 12 classes to do. Yeah, and the results is here. Yep.
Time for one more question. Simon?
We seem to have the usual suspects asking questions here. Unias, the dolerite unit that you're referring to there,
Yep.
I'm not a geologist, but with my limited geological knowledge, it's no surprise that a geologist has inferred that that's continuous,
Yep.
right? So have you thought of a way of introducing that meta-geological knowledge, that understanding of the world into your modelling, so that, you know, that sort of high-level geological knowledge could be somehow incorporated into your modelling process? Bit of a tough question, but have you thought along those lines?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Actually, there was already like a comments to use some Bayesian methods to incorporate geological knowledge, but in my research I was considering just like a data-driven approach. But for example, in this, just let me show you. If we look on the boundaries of this dolerite, when I checked the sum of the blocks, in the second most probable case was actually dolerite, because the distribution somehow was evenly distributed, but in major case, some conditioning data was impacting. That's why if we look some like several...
So your data-driven method is knocking on the door of joining those units up, and just a little bit of extra high-level knowledge would probably tip it towards doing that.
Yeah, as a post-processing method, I'm considering that and having discussion with the mine site geologist, so with Bruce. So I'm working on that, and he has other comments as well. So there are 2 problems to solve in future.
Thanks, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you.
You go that way.
Awesome.
So Nigel?
You promised me Shakespeare, or we got Shakespeare? Yes. The next verse. Okay.
Hirad Assimi is a PhD student from the School of Computer Science at the University of Adelaide. Hirad will tell us about resource heterogeneity modelling from trucking to multiple stockpiles to mill feed. Hirad's passion lies in bridging the research practice gap in multidisciplinary design. His favourite motivational quote is, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." Hirad comes from a city in the north of Iran known for being the UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy. So please hit him up for some local recipes during the tea break. Hirad.
Thank you, Ruth, for your lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. Today, I would like to talk about what I am doing mainly in my PhD under supervision of Professor Frank Newman and Associate Professor Marcus Wagner, and our collaboration is with ICA, with our points of contact, Mr. Chris Garcia and Mr. Ben Kosh. So my project is under Program A, Upstream, supported by OZ Minerals, and I am coming from optimization group, and it's also, it is connected with ATP4 as a translation partner project. And the project objective is modeling and optimization of run-of-mine stockpile recovery. So, longest story short, let's look at the key findings. First of all, we model a stockpile management problem as a scheduling optimization problem. So in this way, we can prioritize avoiding financial penalty fees by the end user over other specifications. And we can also ensure that undesirable properties do not exceed a certain limit for the end user. So what we do as methodology is that we construct a schedule to do that stockpile mine recovery by different machines with iterative algorithms. So we construct a solution step by step to make sure that all the constraints are valid and we find the feasible solution. And we can construct an efficient schedule that we do not exceed those kind of undesirable limits in a schedule. And we can also improve the decision support. So the usefulness for end user is that we can reduce operation costs, we can schedule deliveries with good accuracy, we can do rapid decision making for planning stockpiles, and we can maximize value and productivity. So this is a longer story. So RAM stockpiles, when they dig the mine, they use haul trucks to transport the ore to RAM stockpiles. And RAM stockpiles are essential temporary storage to balance the inflow and outflow. In that stage, a stockpile schedule should determine a selective addition of ore to send it to the next stage, such as the crusher. And there exist some technical limits that failure to meet those can lead to losing money. Those kind of technical limits can include chemical concentration of the deliveries that is sent to the next stage, the operational constraints, or even particle size distribution. So what is missing in practice currently is that machines take time to do the recovery. Machines move from one place to another place in the stockyard, and it also takes time to reclaim one part of the stockpile to perform the recovery. Right now, human experts are scheduling these kind of reclaiming operations, often using rule of thumbs, such as they mix good material with bad material based on their expert knowledge. But human decision-making can cause errors. Planning by human is subject to limited decision support, and they also has lower ability to consider the upcoming blends and requests for upcoming future, for longer-term planning. So a poor operational plan can lead to significant penalty fees, increasing operation costs, unexpected loss in practice, or even variability in decision-making and operation. So these are our end-user challenges. According to the performer of my project, they have difficulty in optimally planning reclaim sequence. They have problems with ensuring that undesirable properties do not exceed certain limits. They have no ability to determine blend with good accuracy before product is removed, and it is hard for them to account and plan for incoming material as well as outgoing material with the ability to reformulate a plan if unforeseen event was to occur. So what we do to deal with this problem is that we model this real-world issue as a scheduling optimization problem, and we try to solve this optimization problem. So this is the main problem statement. Suppose that we have a RAM stockpile, and using GPS data, laser scanning model, and eco-software capability through ATP4 that Zhao is working on, it can turn into a discretized model of a stockyard. That each part of those discretized model is a cut with a particular tonnage, with a particular mineral there that has been specified. The other inputs are the recovery costs. So as I told you, the machine takes time to move from one point to another, and it takes time to take one part of the stockpile. So there is a cost there. There is time consuming. So we have those kind of data as an input. The other thing is precedence constraints. We cannot reclaim a lower bench before we take the upper bench. If we are scheduling these kind of cuts, we should consider those kind of precedence constraints too. The other is delivery requirements. Based on the customer requirement, they may require a range of material, a range of mineral. They may require minerals in a range. For example, they have an upper bound and lower bound for uranium. They have an upper bound or lower bound for other undesirable properties. And safety constraints. Reclaimer machines such as front wheel loaders, they cannot come close to each other with respect to a safety constraint. So these are all input to an optimization model, and we use some step-by-step solution construction techniques to solve and find the planning strategy. And the output is a RAM stockpile recovery schedule for all machines. Here I can show you a Gantt chart that somehow represents the machine schedule as an output. That, for example, we have 3 reclaimers on the site, we have 2 deliveries to provide, and those colored blocks show each cut. And the schedule, the Gantt chart, is the output for my project. So what is a good solution in our opinion is that, first of all, we would like to reduce the penalty fees. So we prioritize the avoiding penalty fees over the utility that we call it as taking more material in a shorter time. So first of all, we would like the violation of penalty material for each request as close as possible to 0 as a quality objective. And the other one is that taking more material in a shorter time as utility. This is how I compare 2 Gantt charts, 2 solutions for my project. So I do not go into the back end, and I just show you the front end. So here there is multiple results. There are multiple results here. You can see each colored line is one of those Gantt chart solutions, and I'm using different methods that I don't go there. So as I told you, I have 3 types of objectives there: the penalties that are the most important, and the utility. So if I go more into detail of that, this is a recent finding that even though we are putting them in a ordered schedule because the penalty does matter, but there is room to improve that kind of objective function determination, such as you can see that a little bit of violating the penalty parcel can be good and can lead to a better utility. Yeah, you can reclaim more material in a shorter time by a little more paying the penalty. This is something that where I can see that a human in the loop could be helpful. So for future works, we can work on stacking components that can be added for dynamic simulation of recovery and the stacking. The human in the loop to obtain more efficient and practical solutions with respect to end user preferences. And there are lots of room for improving the algorithm with respect to foresee what are the upcoming blends for the longer term planning. At the end, I would like to acknowledge the guide from my supervisors, our ICA collaborators, Shi and Almir working on ATP4, our members for their moral support, and the research consortium for funding this project. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks very much, Hirad. We'll read from MapTech. One question I've got for you is, have you considered incorporating material that goes direct to the mill rather than straight to the ROM?
Well, yeah, I remember exactly that question from last year too. Yes, that's an important point, but as we discussed it, it was like that the recovery cost for that could be 0. So it is going direct to the mill. So no, we have not incorporated it, but it can be as a component to be added to the project. Yes.
And we have one down the front here, Yusha.
Thanks, Hirad. This is about stockpiles and not necessarily about ROM stockpiles either. So I'm wondering if you've thought about concentrate stockpiles in front of a ship loader, for example, where you're likely to have different heaps in your concentrate stockpile. It might have different characteristics, different impurities, different copper grades, for example. And perhaps even the warehouses that your suppliers from Caterpillar or somewhere else are operating as well. They're also operating under this same sort of stockpile or warehouse scheduling. So have you looked at just where this might go for the industry generally beyond ROM?
Yes, the way that we are working on that is very parametric. So it can be any type of a stockpile, and we can even develop this for a terminal type of a stockpiles for example, coal handling. It is possible. Is it answering your question?
I wonder if you're actually going there yet, or is that future work to go there, or?
For this project, I guess no, but it can be an extension, yes.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
No worries.
Thank you, Ruth.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Next, we'll hear from Dr. Zhao, a postdoctoral research fellow at the consortium. She is from the School of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Adelaide and is working on fast ROM stockpile modelling for blending optimisation. She completed his PhD at the School of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Adelaide. His thesis focused on 3D stockpile modelling and quality calculations for iron ore stockpiles at ports. She is good at finding valuable information and big data and loves gardening. She.
Thanks for catch that one for me. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zhao, and my project is titled Fast Room Stockpile Modeling for Blending Optimization. I'm supervised by Dr. Tianfu and Associate Professor Larissa. My industry partners are Eka and OZM, so I work closely with Ben, Chris, Amir, and Luke. The main objective of my research is to generate near real-time 3D multi-layered stockpile models for optimization. As indicated on this image, I'm just right underneath Hirad's project. So hopefully my presentation can complete the puzzles for this stockpile blending optimization. I will start with the key contributions and then move on to the background and introduction and present my method and progress achieved and point out some future work. I summarize the key contributions for this project as two aspects. The first one is to improve the blending efficiency for room stockpiles by knowing the quality and quality distribution within stockpiles, and also to enable optimization algorithms to be developed or evaluated during the multiple phases for this bulk material handling. The image here shows the simplified material flow when I start with this project. So material mined from underground will be stacked at in-pit locations and then move on to the room stockpiles or room stockyards. So to know the quality of the material mined from underground, samples are taken every 200 tons. However, there is always a delay of knowing the quality from the samples use the current system, and this delay could be somewhere between 12 to 48 hours. That means when we stack the material at in-pit locations, we do not know exactly the quality about mined material. And when we move this in-pit stockpile to the room stockyard, the understanding about the quality will be further reduced. So it is difficult to making decisions. Either move the material to different locations to optimize the quality or adjust the quality of room stockpile, or reclaim the material at different locations to achieve the correct combinations of quality and quantity requirement for production. The solution this project can offer is to build near real-time 3D multi-layered stockpiles. So when I say near real-time, that means the geometric shape of a stockpile model can be updated after a dump or a loading operation. And also, materials with different layers, materials with different qualities are separated by layers. So in the meantime, the 3D model created can be also reconciled using the laser scanning data provided by OZM. Once we have the record about the geometric shape of our 3D stockpiles, and together with the quality information obtained from SC results, we can calculate the quality and the quality distributions within the stockpile with great accuracy. So that means we can optimize the stacking operation. And in the meantime, this project aims to voxelize a 3D model based on the carting trajectory generated by a front wheel loaders. A voxel means a cart made by the bucket of a front wheel loader. By knowing the quality and the quantity of a voxel, we can direct our front wheel loaders to different locations to optimize reclaim the material. And this imaging here shows the possible optimization algorithms can be fed into the current load and haul operations. So as a translation project, my focus is to solve these questions as efficient as possible, use current available resources and my expertise. I summarize my method and progress in the next 6 slides. The first one is to create a 3D stockpile data set using the laser scanning data provided by the OZM minerals. This data set will be used as the base or the starting point for ECA's system to optimize, to create 3D stockpile models during the stacking and the reclaiming operations. And also, I extracted the boundaries from the laser scanning data, and these boundaries will be used for reconciliations. And the imaging here shows the common material flows in everyday operation at Permanent Hill. So these materials flows are actually summarized or saved in 4 different databases. So my aim is to extract my aim is to attach the quality information to the H-truck load using the keyword searching across those databases. So the quality of H-truck load eventually will be converted into the quality of H layers in our 3D stockpile models. The next step is to extract the load and dump locations for our haul trucks through the GPS dataset saved in the SQL backups. So this imaging here shows the dump location I extracted from the GPS dataset. And also to update this 3D model after a reclaim is being made, I also need to extract the loading locations. When I say loading location means the location of the bucket which being penetrated into a stockpile. This task become a challenger problem because of the data set or because of the current resources. As we can see from these two images, one, a front wheel loader is operating in the stockyard. The GPS measurements are reasonably good. But one is moving close to stockpiles or dump trucks. The positioning accuracy will be reduced, and also in current Jigsaw SQL database, the GPS measurements are taken saved every 5 seconds. So eventually, from this trajectory, it will be a challenger job to identify the locations, the loading locations and the dumping locations for our front wheel loaders. And the last step shows the voxelization of a 3D stockpile. So it's based on my PhD work. I used the kinematics equations of different vehicles. The top one here shows a Charon stockpile reclaimed by a bucket wheel reclaimer. And the bottom one is a Charon stockpile again reclaimed by the front wheel loaders. As we can see, those voxels may contain materials from different layers, which means different qualities. And the voxels are created by 3D boolean operations between the trajectory and the 3D stockpile models. My future work will be to reconcile room stock model created by ICAS system and use laser scanning data provided by OZM minerals and use the same method and resources to build across room stockpile models, and also to create a new data set for Hirad's project based on the current progress. And also, I would like to install a fast and accurate RTK GPS system onto the front wheel loaders to know the exact loading locations for the front wheel loaders. And the last one is to install 3D laser scanners or other 3D sensors to estimate the quantity of a cart made by the front wheel loaders. Knowing the quantity means, by knowing the volume of a cart, that means by knowing the mass of a cart, because volume times the density will give us the mass. And I will take this opportunity to thank my supervisors, my industry partners, and the staff members from MacTech and the research consortium. I always appreciate your kind understanding and support. Yeah, thanks very much.
Any questions for Xi?
Can I maybe jump in there? I'm going to jump in there. Thanks, Xi. I'd just maybe ask you to explain a little bit more, perhaps about the research expectations of your project and the potential implementation, what that can mean to the end user.
My understanding is if we know exactly the quality distributions as mentioned here. So if we know exactly the quality and the quality distributions of a stockpile, so which means we can stack materials at different locations to adjust the quality of a stockpile or optimize the quality of a stockpile. And also we can reclaim the material proactively, so to achieve the right combination of quality and quantity required by the customers or for production.
And implementation?
Oh, sorry. Eventually, I really hope this 3D model can be integrated into OZM mineral system based on the 3D models created by ICA. So, and also Hirad's project can be evaluated, and we can use different optimization algorithms for this load and haul operations.
Thank you.
Hello, online audience. That was a great presentation. Just a quick question. You mentioned that the GPS refresh rate is 5 seconds.
Yep.
It's not enough. It throws things out quite
Yep.
quickly. What sort of speed at refresh rate, what instinct are you thinking it needs to be to keep the accuracy you might like moving forward?
Good questions. The first thing is like why I say the GPS is like saved every 5 seconds. We actually do not know exactly the refresh rate about GPS receiver itself. It is how the data being saved in the mine of Jigsaw. So, but my understanding is like when this front wheel loader is operating in the stockyard, it will finish the loading process in 1.5 minutes. So that means like 5 or 6 dumps. So in that case, I'm thinking might be just 1 hertz, which means every 1 second will be sufficient. And the GPS receiver I'm expecting to install onto that front wheel loader, maximal rate is 10 hertz. And the precision accuracy can be achieved to less than centimeter. Yo, thanks.
We'll wrap it up. Arno, one question, Paul?
Yep. Just reflecting on the question of implementation here, I'm just wondering if you could, if it's possible now to say, well, if everything was working properly, you know, you weren't constrained by GPS or anything else, could you get to a point where the upper limit of movement and storage is this? You know, so in other words, there's a goal to be set that people could benchmark against. Does that make sense?
Thanks. I believe so, because while doing my PhD, it looks like the material in our stockyard is only being reclaimed around 50% of their potential engineering production rate. So my understanding is like if we can integrate everything into a big system, and there will be significant improvement. Thanks.
We'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Shi.
Yep.
Back down again. So we'll now have a 15-minute break for morning tea. The morning tea will be served at the back of the room, and please make sure to check out the consortium posters that are there for viewing. Just a reminder that if you do leave the room to go to the bathroom, to put your masks back on, and also take that opportunity to check in with the QR code. There's a specific QR code for this room as well as for the wine centre. And if you have any questions, we've been keeping this quite tight because we're on a schedule, but if you have any questions you haven't got to ask yet, please feel free to have a talk to the presenters during the morning tea break. Thank you.